Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we read about some Dungeons & Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. With me today, I have the wonderful Darren Kenny, who is, quite frankly, amazing, which I know is such a big introduction, but I think it's important. So the context to this is that I started writing for Dragon Plus magazine, and I was asked to do some interviews and do some stuff for the Best of DMs Guild, and I've stumbled across Darren's work, and I thought, brilliant. Not only it will be good for writing, but also for podcast stuff. So Darren is here with me today. Darren, how are you?
Good. And if you're expecting amazing, prepare for disappointment.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I bring in with the high, you bring it in with the low, and humble expectations. So Darren, tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do? And what's sort of your, I guess, RPG experience?
In the real world, I guess I'm a software developer, but I also make Dungeons & Dragons content on DM's Guild. Got into it I think just over 3 years ago. And yeah, I love making player-facing content, new classes, new subclasses. And I'm launching my first ever new game on Kickstarter.
Exciting stuff. So RPG experiences. So where did you start? Is it one of those things where you've I've been playing D&D since I was small, or is it something very recent, or have you just been playing lots of RPG games?
No, I always kind of cringe at the I've been playing D&D for 50 years. I know more than you could ever know. No, me and my friends heard of D&D, and then we guessed the rules.
Oh, amazing.
based on video games we played that were kind of tactical move around and attack. And we made up classes for a little short a one night campaign. The infamous classes of Lightning Ninja and chaotic warrior and all these an alchemist, really bizarre little things. And then eventually one of us was we should probably buy one of the rule books and actually learn to play.
I love that though, almost like a parody of I can imagine just being absolutely silly and stuff, but so much fun as a result. That is awesome. So have you always been into sort of high fantasy in general, or is it all sorts of genres you've sort of been into?
I've mostly played high fantasy games, at least in role-playing games. But in general, I would love to. I've been waiting for a chance to play Call of Cthulhu or
yes.
Oh, what's that new one that came out recently? Oh, it's coming out. Sorry, Diesel's coming out soon, which looks like another kind of very post-apocalyptic diesel punk. And I want to try a few new things because high fantasy is fun and all, but I want to play the Star Wars tabletop game or the Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, there's loads of different RPGs coming out that are all sort of their own little worlds and stuff, which don't necessarily fit quite well into the D20 mechanics. But yeah, Star Wars is an interesting one. And again, for those people who've not, again, I know this is a D&D related podcast, but the Star Wars one it's about sort of the symbols on the dice, and you have successes and triumphs and failures and threats, and that idea of storytelling just through symbols and interpreting the symbols rather than numbers. It's such a different way of telling a story. I don't know if it works too well for podcasting, interestingly, but I think it's an interesting way to get players involved in playing the game and getting I do this but it doesn't quite succeed, and getting people to collaborate rather than just it's a 15, does that hit? Yeah,
it does. Sometimes you just can't get into it and you're it's just a whole lot of math today. It's not really getting me there.
I recently interviewed and I'm going to get his name wrong, I always get his name wrong, but Keith Amand, Armand, I think is how he pronounces it. And his tip was if you've got lots of stuff, just write yourself a cheat sheet with all your things, grouping spells together for certain things. So if you've got crowd control spells, have them there and all that sort of thing. I literally made a combat sheet for my character recently because it was just a lot of maths. And on a Monday night, I'm just I can't remember what I'm supposed to do, even though I've been playing it for 3 years. But every level you get up, we're level 16 now. So now I have this cheat sheet with everything. It's okay, here's my opener. Here's the main go-to. Here's something if it doesn't work. And if I need to get out of it, here's this, this, and this. And I feel so amazed that I spent an hour on this stupid document. But again, it's that sort of thing where I think it's just so helpful just to have something as a quick reference. Otherwise, calculating lots of maths under pressure can be hard at the best of times.
I like the idea that your character has a mental flow chart of I'll use this. Didn't work. Better go plan C3. I do people always talk about their characters built so well. I like building characters kind of janky because I rolled the best stats I've ever rolled, and I said to my DM I'll just re-roll that. This seems really bad. He was you rolled them, you keep them. So I had a wizard with, I think I started with 18 intelligence, and I still had like another 18 and a 17. And I was like, I'm going to put 18 into strength, and he's going to be like
muscle wizard.
This muscle wizard. I kept for the first 5 levels of the campaign, I was running around with a pipe, just hitting people. And
so fun.
It was such a good experience. And I cherish that character. And it's all, I think bad characters are just so much better than your optimized, perfect paladins.
Before we get into it, so that you're saying, so you obviously created your own homebrew stuff, and obviously it goes on to DM's Guild and stuff like that. And I know we've talked about it with you for Dragon Plus, but like, why did you start creating your own classes and stuff? Was it something about Player's Handbook? You're like, no, this needs to be better, but jankier, or was it what was sort of the inspiration behind it?
It took me a while to get into like actual class design. The subclasses all started because my friends were like, "Is there a moon cleric?" And I was like, "No, but I'll just make you one." And eventually I had built up like 12 or 13 of these custom ones, and I was like, I'll just put them online. And people like them, so I was like, cool, I'll just keep making them. And then I got into like parodying, like I did one for Marvelous Archetypes, where it's all the characters from Marvel. I did that because we saw Avengers, got drunk, and then while drunk, me and my friends were like, no, this guy should be a monk and this guy should be a fighter. And then like in the space of 3 hours, me and my girlfriend made it, put it into layout, uploaded it. And the next morning I woke up and it like eclipsed everything I'd ever made. And it was made in like a drunken haze. So I got really into like parodying other stuff and making it. But I don't like classes that feel like they're fitting into a niche. I hate when it's like, there's no warlord, we need a warlord class. I'm like, no. We need like a floating, energy throwing, crazy thing. We need weird classes. We need to break the kind of traditional molds. We need something more bizarre and fun. So a lot of mine are just that.
That's amazing. So, because obviously you said you created so many of these subclasses. Do you run several different campaigns, or is it mostly one-shots or little mini-arcs?
Both. I'm currently running 2 campaigns, but I like long campaigns, but I feel like as a player, you don't want to be stuck with one character, if it's your only game especially. So I've started having like side characters that kind of support the main one. Which has been really fun because the players are level 8. So I'm like, great, we'll have like a level 4 side arc where before you arrive in the city, these characters are fighting in it. So we're going to have like a little test run. And then people get to try out new characters and I get to try out some custom subclasses. So everyone kind of wins.
Interesting. So have you always been the DM then? Or have you been a mixture of player and DM? Or
for a long time, I was just chronic DM. It began because I found the PDF online.
You fool.
Bless me being 13 and not having the money or the knowledge, and being in rural Ireland, hard to find even where you'd buy D&D books. So I remember finding the 4th edition D&D book online for free. And they were like, great, you learn the rules and you explain them to us. And
rubbish.
Got trapped. And then, bless my friend Connor and Ronan for finally, like 8 years later, letting me be a player.
Okay, I guess you proved yourself that you are a DM.
Yeah.
I guess we'll let you play. So let's talk about the topic that we've chosen today. So we're going to talk about. Oh yeah, I know. Like we could just talk about you, Darren. But I thought maybe I'd be happy to talk to you all about your homebrew stuff. Because I'm someone who's never really homebrewed anything because I'm a coward. I think I'm worried about getting things done. Yeah,
you're the bravest. You picked up source material where one of the players might know it. That's way scarier. I could not do that. I'm like, this is the god of blah. They're like, no, it's not. I'm like, listen, I'm just faking it.
Just go with it, my friends. Yeah. I've definitely had bits in the campaign when it's clearly like, here's the chosen path, and they go, well, I guess we should go down this path, but what if not? And I'm just like going, I think you'll find there's invisible walls all around you, and it is forcing you to go this way.
One of the players is like, I don't want to do it, and all the NPCs in the street turn and look at him.
My God.
You're breaking the simulation.
Yeah, he's like, oh, quick. The holodeck is breaking.
Yeah.
So, but today we are going to be talking about the Feywild and the Shadowfell, sort of 2 planes, essentially. We've talked about the outer planes before, but planes of existence that sort of share the same cosmological space on the material plane. So Darren, what do you know of the Feywild and Shadowfell? Have you had much experience in your campaigns or in general?
So 48 hours ago, my only knowledge was what I learned watching Critical Role.
Yes.
So like the Shadowfell is an evil place. The Feywild is a Celtic forest. Like that was all I knew. And then I had to read and watch videos, and I'm kind of feel like I've learned the forbidden knowledge and I'm haunted. The Feywild's not lovely, it's terrifying.
Yes.
And the Shadowfell is I'm going to send my players there because it seems like a horrible place to send them.
Yeah, no, I too. I think that I was going to say, like, my first experience of the Shadowfell was Critical Role, like when the despair and the idea that, you know, you're getting drained of all these things. Like, this was early on campaign 1, so it instantly, horrible place. But yeah, the Feywild is such an interesting thing, and we'll go into each of these in general. You feel like you're going to send your players. Instantly, you just said, like, I'm going to send my players to the Shadowfell. Why is that? What is it about the Shadowfell that really appeals to you as a DM?
So I have like bad dice luck in general, especially as a DM. Like, I'm cursed, full like Will Wheaton style.
Yeah.
So my players have a series of victories over me, and in the Shadowfell, everything's inverted. So all the great victories and great heroes are like twisted to be wrong. So I just want to send them a trip down memory lane where they could, in all the events where they could have lost, and meet the evil or like corrupted versions of themselves. Because that just seems like a blast, you know? That
does seem quite good. So yeah, so in the Shadowfell, so both the Feywild and the Shadowfell, they sort of take what you have the land there. So if you see a castle in the material plane, in, say, the Feywild, it will be a beautiful, massive, sort of naturalistic building with vines around it, with sort of, you know, plumage and that sort of thing. It looks incredible. Whereas in the Shadowfell, it is a ruin. It is destroyed. And so yeah, it's like almost like a flip of a coin, essentially, about it being incredible and beautiful. But like you said, not necessarily good. But then in the Shadowfell, just being completely desolate and despair. And it's just incredible as a result. Let's start with the Shadowfell, though, because I do think the Shadowfell, I wonder, just because the way you said that as well about wanting to send your players there, I think the Shadowfell is definitely something that most D&D campaigns may send their players to. Like, I think it's maybe out of the two, the ones you do, which I not necessarily true, but I think it definitely, for me, there is something about the Shadowfell about which scares players, I think. So the Shadowfell was once called the Plane of Shadows. It is a dimension of black, grey, and white where most other colour has been leached from everything. And I remember when certainly I've been in the Shadowfell for the as a player, this idea that there's just nothing, and even having your torch, your light, the colour being seeped out of it into the thing. It's like, again, that sort of vivid imagery in your head is just terrifying. It is a place of darkness that hates the light, where the sky is a black vault with neither sun or stars. So yeah, so it overlaps the material plane, and it's just a colourless landscape, essentially. And with, like you said, there are landmarks that are recognisable, but they are twisted and warped, distorted reflection of what exists on the material plane. If you were going to take your players to the Shadowfell, what sort of imagery, what sort of places would you take to? So you said obviously they've had victories in their campaigns and twisted. What would it be? Would it just be like battlefields or towns they've saved, or what were you thinking? Just to
kind of echo what you said, the idea that the torch is being leaked color, I love the image of your players arrive here and your characters, everyone has one character in their group at least who has a very visual, distinct style. Like, we have a ranger who has these beautiful green and gray cloak, and like the paladin's armor is like platinum with blue veins through it. So I love the idea of them standing against this black and white background. It's such a great opening image. And then it would just be like, they have picked fights with a lot of stuff. So like, they saved their town from a lich. So instead of it being, you know, a happy little town, it could be an undead riddled version of their hometown. Or they stopped an infernal infestation one point. You could have that just like completely, all these shadow versions of devils, which would be a great kind of combination of two different creature types. I just want to take all their beautiful victories and warp them, and have like all the NPCs that they met that they saved be like corrupted. Because they really have just made so many friends along the way. Oh no. So the good ship friendship turns into a nightmare boat. Oh, scary. Yeah, I think it's almost like There's definitely Star Trek episodes where it's like, here's the point in time, and it's what if it's the alternate timeline and that sort of thing. And you have, the evil, in quotation mark, characters who have a goatee and a beard. And if that happens to your NPCs and stuff, you're like, oh no, we must save them and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I think there's a beautiful picture in the DM's guide where there's some people just sort of walking down like a mountainside, and there's in the sort of the background there is like a huge sort of like a castle on a crag essentially, and it's just all grey, all ruin, and there are
like birds just floating around or flying around thing. And I think that's the thing for me. I think if I was really getting into the Shadowfell, like that desolate thing, that to get to one place takes a while, and you to get that sort of we'll come on to the despair of it. There's something about birds, like eagles being around in deserts, or like crows or something like that just adds to that ambience. Having a cloud of them just circling places, you're like, this is not a good sign, you know.
It's the carrion effect, right? It's because if you see birds swarming, you know there's corpses.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, just in the distance, you're like, oh, it's not a good sign.
My desire to have like a really serious dark Shadowfell has been completely replaced by wanting every NPC they've ever met just to have a mustache.
Oh yeah,
like one of those curly mustaches, regardless of gender or the species or anything. Every single one of them has a mustache.
Like, yeah, so the evil twirling.
Even people who have mustaches will have more mustache
on top of obviously. So I guess that the question sort of back to you then. So obviously, I know that you said when you create subclasses and classes and your things, obviously it's like a couple of episodes or you do long campaigns and stuff like that. Would you say your DM style is more like a janky in the sense of like japes and this is fun, or do you like doing some serious stuff as well?
I think when I first started DMing, I wanted a Lord of the Rings, you know, and it was never quite that serious. There was plenty of like humor, but after watching like Dimension 20, we've completely dived into like, now it's like 70% humor and 30% serious, and it's so much more fun. Not having like, the tales are still epic, but we laugh constantly, which is the best part of it.
And that's what we need certainly right now. Is that I think I've said this before on the podcast, I just love the idea that, you know, people can come into this and they get their own, what they put into it is what they get out, and getting that experience. And there is something about just laughing, being not stupid players per se or stupid characters, but just doing something and it works. You're like, holy shit, that would not have worked in real life. But I'm currently running like a Curse of Strahd campaign, and I'm deliberately trying to keep it as serious as possible. And it's really hard to judge because obviously as a player, I love the hijinks. I love serious and I love the emotional stuff. So when I'm a DM, obviously I'm like, obviously there's a certain story with Curse of Strahd, so it's a little bit easier. But it's very hard to tell if your players are enjoying it until at the end when like, oh, that was really good. Because obviously they're all like really engaged, but they don't say anything. There's not the laughter per se. And because I'm an improviser, I'm like, oh no, it's not fun. Nobody's having fun. I'm ruining it by being too serious. But it's just, I know it's just a different way to play, but I just find it really interesting. Like, I guess because it's online as well, you don't have those little like signs to be like, oh yes, that person's enjoying it, or they're laughing, or they're not enjoying it, they're looking at their phone or something like that. It's so hard to judge online. So
it really is. It's really hard to feed off the energy. I feel like it's easier to do a session because everyone just jumps online. Well, the sessions need to be shorter because you're not feeding off the energy as well.
Absolutely. So I'm guessing most of yours have been online recently. Did you used to play in person?
We did 3 years ago. Maybe 2.5, I moved to England. So all of our campaigns went online. And then we were like, we're coming back. And then COVID. So all of our campaigns are still online.
Oh, no. So just to go back to the Shadowfell then, because again, I just love the idea of everyone having mustaches to really undercut that serious scary to the moment. So in the DM's guide, it talks about crossing. So how do you get into this place? Because again, these planes exist in the same space. So it's the idea, certainly for the Shadowfell, is that there is these crossings where the veil between the material plane and the Shadowfell are very thin. And it gives some examples of like, it could be a shadow in the corner of a dusty crypt, or it could be across a battlefield or a graveyard or a tomb. And it's just a weird sort of like shimmer. And like in my head, I see it as that sort of, I can't remember which book it is now, but in Harry Potter, when they're in the vaults of prophecies and stuff, and Sirius Black falls through the veil.
Yeah.
That's why I imagine it's that sort of thing where it's almost like a shimmer in the air and you can hear voices. These crossings are very thin, and so it's just very easy to get in and out. And that's where sort of like, I don't know, maybe that's the idea that there's always a little bit of evil in the world somewhere. I mean, in terms of crossings, for me, I just quite like that it's always just there, like almost like a Doctor Who thing. Like it's in the corner of your mind, and you look, and it's just there, the corner of your eye, and then it's just, do you cross it? Like, why would you cross it? So it seems so easy to get in and out, but I guess maybe, I don't know if it's like one of those magic portal things where once you go in, it's like, great, here's the exit. It's at the end of this horrible nightmare ride. Did you have any thoughts on like how you'd get your players to the Shadowfell at all, or anything like that?
I saw one of those, you see them all the time, Instagram posts where it's like 10 ways of introducing your players to the Hells and 10 ways of blah. And it was a great one for the Shadowfell. And it was, some of them were like you said, it's a shadow in the corner of the room, and when you go to investigate it, or it's an NPC standing in a corner, and when you touch him, you're all pulled through. Very Blair Witch style.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
the two that I really liked. One was the NPC standing in the corner. I think that's awesome because you can kind of creep out your players by having one of their NPCs do it.
Yeah.
And the other one was a full-length mirror. And I was like, and I clicked that one, and I brought me to like this other page where it was talking about how everyone who approaches the mirror sees themselves differently, but they see everyone else looking normal. So one, it's a great opportunity to have like every player bar one looking really scary and haunting, and then having that one player with a fake mustache. Perfect chance. But then, like, when everyone's standing in front of it, their doppels grab them, pull them through.
Yes.
And now all the doppelgangers are in the real world. So not only do the players have to like survive the Shadowfell and get back out somehow, when they get out, it's like you're fighting yourself. Big climactic battle, and those are so fun.
Oh yeah, having doppelgangers of your players is hilarious. There's a London-based D&D show which is now online called Questing Time, run by Paul Foxtrot, and of course it's lots of comedians, and it's like month after month playing different characters through the same world. And there's one time where obviously the comedians never remember their character sheets, they never remember what they're doing, and then they had the big battle with doppelgangers, and Paul just goes pulls out all 4 character sheets, goes, let me show you how you really play them, and all the players were like, oh no.
Wow.
It was just really fun to watch. But just going back to what you said before about the NPC in the corner. So I've been rewatching Doctor Who recently, and I've got to Peter Capaldi's sort of series, and there's an episode called Flatliners or Flatlines or something like that, and it's about these creatures who are 2-dimensional, and they're trying to reach out to the humans, but obviously killing them in the process, and clearly not evil. And it gets to a point where it's sort of almost that, if you've seen Jason and the Argonauts, that sort of 3D style where they're sort of moving and stuff like that. But what's creepy about them is that they'll disintegrate humans and then put them almost as like murals on a wall, but with their back turned to you. So it'd be the person with their back turned to you drawn on the wall.
Oh.
And so that's what it just reminded me of, that idea of somebody looking at the wall, but maybe you go that they're not 3D, they're 2D or something, and then they turn around, and obviously then the face isn't there and all that sort of thing, and they reach out.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love the facelessness will be beautiful. Oh, that's...
I imagine like a proper graffiti style sort of, and the way they move is also like it's as if they're being drawn very quickly and they're reaching out, but 2D.
I love that.
Yeah, so that's what I was getting. That's sort of almost like the flat man image essentially. So again, that little bit of creep, that little bit of weirdness, and then again, being dragged through in some way, and then you're like, well, we're gonna have to get out of this horrible, disgusting place.
You're talking about the guy who like ran his own player characters against them. Like this is how you're supposed to do it. In the D&D Beyond era, I can just pull up all their character sheets and just make the attack rolls against themselves.
Yeah,
it's so easy.
It's so easy. Everything that. I mean, we're not sponsored by D&D Beyond yet, but it's so easy to do that. It's really revolutionized putting stuff together. I'm still getting used to trying to do custom stuff, I will say. But once you've got that sorted.
I love it. I love the custom options on D&D Beyond. I can't believe how detailed they are. Sorry, not sponsored again. But if you want to D&D Beyond.
But I think this is the thing. I think if you've ever been overwhelmed by just the amount of books, like I'm sure, Darren, you can probably see, I have the ton of books behind me and so many more on the ground, and I'm sure you're the same. But there's something about having D&D Beyond. If you are starting it, it is so easy, because especially if you've got that main tier, again, not sponsored, but you can share all the stuff with the players, and you can easily sort, and it just optimizes everything so quickly, and it's not scary anymore. You're not spending hours doing character creation and go, right, now that's done, we can start playing. It's just like,
it's like, I need a monster of a certain category, or they've talked about a magical item that I'm not aware of. You just search it on D&D Beyond. Super handy. Again, not sponsored, but D&D Beyond.
Yeah. I think just to finish off the Shadowfell, so again, in the DM's guide, it talks about a city called Evernight. So again, I will say I'm not au fait with a lot of D&D lore, so anything on the Sword Coast, etc. But I do know that in the Forgotten Realms, there is, in Faerun, there is Neverwinter, which is obviously one of the bigger cities, and is, again, a really interesting past and history, and you can obviously do stuff in that. And in the Shadowfell, they have the opposite city, the dark reflection of it, called Evernight. And
it's not ever summer. They didn't just
sadly, I think they were like, no, it's never summer here. Like, although that would have been great, just calling it's never summer. Just it's talked about like it's a city of cracked stone edifices and homes of rotten wood, mostly trampled grey dust, and pretty much the residents include mad necromancers, corrupt purveyors of the human flesh, whatever that might be, evil worshippers of deities, and others who are able to make themselves useful and crazy enough to want to live there. But the bulk of the population is the shambling dead, which is what you sort of alluded to. The last sort of final line is that rumours abound that this foul place mirrors one city on every world. So I love the idea that you could just take the sort of template, essentially, and put it on anywhere in your world, and it is just an exact opposite. So just giving that little sort of nugget of an idea, like having that the undead city, but you're having all these other people, like the dead necromancers, and I guess is that you go into position, these people will be helpful, and they're like, no, they're cannibals, no, they're this, and it's it is a bit Curse of Strahd in a way when you look at Barovia and the Lackey and all that sort of thing. But I think this is just, if it's just complete opposite what it would be, and I just really like that as a consequence, I guess. So.
Especially late in the campaign when your players have achieved so much. You've got so much more material to like twist against them. And especially for the doppelgangers, I've had my ass kicked by those characters for 4 years. I know exactly how they operate. I know where their weaknesses lie.
You got that cheat sheet, and you're like, oh, so this is what you do? Great.
This character is going to be great at killing this character, and this character is going to be excellent at killing this one. Like, I'm ready.
Oh, I'm excited to hear when you finally do it. So there's optional rules for the Shadowfell. Like most planes that we've talked on the DM's Book Club, there's Shadowfell Despair, which I think most people will be aware of. Like you were talking about before, Darren, there's obviously Critical Role definitely had it in certain parts. So the idea that there's this atmosphere that like is pervading and sort of like through all of the Shadowfell, and it afflicts characters with despair. And essentially, all you have to do is that if there's a character that's not native to the Shadowfell, which is probably all of your players, they make a DC 10 Wisdom saving throw once per day. On a failure, they're affected by some level of despair, and you roll a D6, and you can get either apathy, dread, or madness. And I just love that because they gain the flaws, which are obviously great for role playing. So the apathy one is like, I don't believe I can make a difference to anyone or anything. Dread is like, I'm convinced this place is going to kill me, and I can't tell what's real anymore, for madness. And I just think those combinations for players, and again, maybe it's, I don't know about you, Darren, but for me, obviously, a big part of playing these games, like this combat stuff is fun and doing something, but the role play. So I can imagine having this happening to players as they're making their way, and it's not necessarily the encounters they have to with other creatures or monsters that they find in the Shadowfell, but from themselves, and they're like, no, we can go on. No, you're not worthless. You're not all this sort of thing. It's just, I just really love it as a concept. It's such a small little thing as well.
I do actually recommend that for anyone listening who's running a game and wants to use those mechanics, don't use the 3 that they provide you with. Look at your players' characters and make ones that are effective for them, because I had the Ranger and her Wolf, and I didn't affect the Ranger at all, but I was using like corruption points to hit the Wolf instead, and it was going more feral the more times they slept in the Paladin was becoming faithless. I think the monk was, I used fear for the monk because his character was like the youngest, and I wanted to make him like,
interesting,
to break down his like spirit. And I think if you aim them towards your players, if it's not just your character is going mad, like if you target the specific personalities that your characters have created, it's way more effective. There's nothing scarier than a Beastmaster losing control of their pet.
That is such a good bit of advice. Yeah, they're making it personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess sometimes I think these are good starting points, but then like, what are you going to do? Because this is affecting your character. To other characters in the party, they might not see it, but if your beast goes off, it becomes more feral. If you're losing your faith and it's just draining everything around you. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Late game effects, like if they got 3 points of corruption, however you want to run it, the bard's inspiration doesn't work anymore because they can't bring themselves to inspire others because they're not feeling like things like that. Like the Beastmaster command's no longer working, or the beast is just completely independent during battle now.
Wow.
Like if you really go for it, like I took away my cleric's ability to cast spells in a place where the people were like anti-religious, so they had created this whole domain, and every time they slept there, they would lose another tier of spell slot.
Ooh.
So they were racing to finish it. But I think if you get to know your player characters and then start targeting them, it always feels like a deeper story.
So would you say then with Shadowfell stuff, would you put that as a later game thing then, or would it be something you put in early on for you?
I ran the corruption thing at level 7, but at any point during that, they could have left. They had the means to head south and be like, we're done with this, we can get purified. They were aware of the mechanics of it. I think that's fine to introduce early, maybe level 4 or 5, and have like a short stint where corruption only reaches like 0.1 or 2. But then definitely, if you really want to have fun with that kind of system, you got to go late game.
Exactly, because I think maybe people get more comfortable with their stuff. And I think, like you're saying, that they're constantly winning, and you're like, well, look at this.
Yeah,
I'm starting to take things away, but the difficulty is still there.
My friends always joke that there's a necromancer who became a lich in their game, and they beat him 4 times. They've killed him and turned him into a lich, and then killed the lich 3 times, and the 3rd time they finally ended him for good. And they joke about how he's just a nuisance now. He's not even like a villain. So I'm thinking in the Shadowfell, I'm going to bring him back and give him a fake mustache and just sick him on them.
Like a Shadow Lich-esque type thing, but like the proper like Wario moment. Is it?
Yeah. I'm back again. Round 6, motherfuckers. Let's go.
So with all that Shadowfell stuff out of the way, let's take a look at the Feywild. So the Feywild, as we sort of alluded to, is sort of not necessarily the opposite of the Shadowfell. It is the Plane of the Faerie. It's a land of soft lights and wonder, a place of music and death, the realm of everlasting twilight with glittering fairy lights bobbing in the gentle breeze and fat fireflies buzzing over groves and fields. Again, here you have and I'm sure we've all seen, like, again, Critical Role's done this as well, this idea of an ongoing, beautiful forest, but it's always ever twilight. It's always like a sun never sets or rises or anything like that. So it's that sort of, when you've gone through a forest yourself in the real world, and then again, you're at that sort of point where you're camping or something like that, it's almost like a magical moment frozen in time. And that's the thing with the Feywild, is always about the time when you go into it, when you go out, which we'll talk about with the time stuff. Was there anything that stood out to you reading about or looking at the Feywild stuff? I'd
always pictured the Feywild as, it's tricky and it's dangerous, but it's not like malicious or evil. And then I read about it, and it's so evil and so malicious.
Yes.
I was like, oh, they're going to visit a Fey person, and that the person will like be a bit haughty and strange. But it's like, no, they like the way you sing, so you're trapped there forever. And if you defy them, they'll kill you. It's like, okay, this is just as evil as the Shadowfell, but it has a really pretty filter on it.
Yeah, it's completely opposite. Whereas, I guess, the Shadowfell is deliberately like, this is a really awful place. Here, it is that weird, almost siren effect. You're like, this is lovely, this is great. But yeah, this idea that the Fae, this sort of fairy folk, they are sort of mercurial and whimsical, and they like, I like that. You're mine now. Yeah. I like that. And it almost like maybe like a toddler thing in a way. They're like, it's mine. Why would I give it? It's mine now. That sort of like, selfishness.
They're so like, you're immortal. You only live 100 years. Why wouldn't I adopt you, you little like goldfish creature? Like that's the category that you are in. You're a goldfish to these like Fae entities.
They've talked about, obviously, before about warlocks and having a Fae patron or something. And that is the relationship I see it as, because warlocks in general are about like a master-servant sort of power dynamic, although it's not always like that. But again, with the Fae, you have to be like, they see you as a pet. They see you as a little plaything. They're like, oh, you're back. Excellent. I need you to do these things because it'll entertain me. And that it's that idea of evil, but it's like selfish evil. It's all about me and what I want to do. And again, I didn't realize this until reading into it, is that in the Forgotten Realms aspect of the Feywild, you have the sealing and unsealing Fae. There is these 2 courts, essentially. You have the Titania of the Summer Court and the Queen of Air and Darkness of the Unsealing Fae.
Beautiful title. That's extra.
I think it's interesting because obviously most people will know Titania through obviously British folklore and Shakespeare and all that sort of thing. And I was like, I wonder who would be her opposite. And it's just the Queen of Air and Darkness. That is my title. I don't need a name. And what I didn't realize about sealing and unsealing. So sealing is like happy. And the idea is that these are the happy Fae, and the unsealing is the unhappy Fae.
I did not know that.
Because it's interesting because obviously there's this assumption, I guess, saying like, well, Queen Titania, she is good, and the Queen of Air and Darkness, she is bad. But it says actually they're not correlated necessarily with good and evil. They just see things differently, and they can work together, but they are, they're jealous of each other. And that, again, that idea of jealousy and like the selfishness, and then constantly comparing yourself to other people. I literally got me thinking about social media, Instagram, when you say like you see those influencers, and so that's why I see these Fae courts now as sort of almost rival influencers, and just but that idea of being selfish and like the happiness and unhappiness and attributing those to the different kinds of Fae.
I went in thinking it was evil and good. I thought it was like dark Fae and like light Fae. I feel like maybe the Unseelie Court are actually better and closer to good, because they're like, we accept everyone no matter how odd. And the Seelie Court are like, oh, you're not a pureblood elf, we're Slytherin, get out of here.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. And I think, because again, they do talk about for Warlock patrons, you could have any one of the unsealing Fae as well. But as far as I could see, certainly from my brief research as well, I couldn't find too much about the unsealing Fae and the Queen of Air and Darkness. I'm sure there is lots of like homebrew stuff out there, but that's the thing. I think most people, because they're like, oh, well, we want to have quote unquote good Fae. So Queen Titania, Oberon, the Green Prince, all that sort of thing. And the fun JP ones, which maybe they're more stereotypical or more tropey in the sense of like, well, they're selfish and they're passionate and they're for the wilds and stuff. So maybe it's, I don't know, easier for DMs to portray or to put that. But I just love, the Queen of Air and Darkness, who I did find a description of her where it's just like a throne, and in the center is this dark gem that floats up.
Yeah.
What a cool image that is. Like, it's not a tangible person that you see as a queen. It's just like a void, essentially, like just a gem floating up and down. I thought, what a cool image.
I would like to have a warlock with the Fae patron, and it's just like a super emo. The Queen of Air and Darkness is like, what do you even want? Like, geez, so much work.
Fine.
Yeah. Here's your magic.
Like a disgruntled teenager. Like, now I'm busy.
Absolutely. I want my emo Fae patron. I really do.
That would be so cool. Talking about sort of Fae crossings as well. So for the Feywild, you're talking about places of mystery and beauty. And again, that idea is a near perfect reflection of the material plane. The way you cross into them is almost like these portals where the two places touch. And usually there's something forest related. So where it's entering a clearing, wading into a pool, which I quite like that idea that you're just wandering across a river or something, or a lake, and then you just appear somewhere it was even more foresty. Stepping into a circle of mushrooms, I mean, classic.
Love that. In Ireland, despite it being like hundreds of years later and all the science in the world, if I see a fairy fort, I will avoid it. I would go out of my way not to go into that. How
interesting. Obviously, I know Ireland has got a lot of many fairy folklore stuff. Is that just because you grew up with that sort of thing, or? Yeah,
it's because it's like, oh my God, you find a leprechaun, it gives you gold. It's like, no, you find a leprechaun and you die.
It kills you.
These things are, it's so funny when someone puts up like something on the guild and it's all like, happy fae. I'm like, that is not what we were raised on. We were not raised to mess with them or like interact. We were raised to avoid them because they will kill you, or you will disappear, or you will. My favorite one, which haunted me, was an 8-year-old walked into a fairy ring and then an 80-year-old man came out, and I was like, I just don't.
Oh, horrible!
I just don't want any of this.
I did see there was a picture recently. I think again, when there's always like D&D memes and stuff of a children's slide into a ring of mushrooms, and people going, "No, don't do it.
That's not what you want.
It's a trap." Oh, and the other one they give an example is crawling under a trunk of a tree. So again, all these,
that.
It's that sort of thing where it's like, you may enter the Fae, you must crawl under this tree. You're like, really? Is it? Yes, because again, it's that sort of thing where I can imagine people meeting you at the other end going, you look ridiculous. You're scrubbling over things. But yeah, the idea of like walking into a lake and making it to the other side, and it's a completely different crossing. I just thought that was a really cool image.
What about a waterfall? Because it's the water passing, and as you step into the waterfall, you maybe under the side, you step back out into the outside. So instead of stepping into the interior, it's just like you step out and you're outside
just step
again.
In and out. Yeah. Gosh, that would be. I like that again. And it's so quick that you don't realize you've changed into a different plane. Oh, that's so cool.
If you got like a druid who's using control water to part the waterfall, you get that great visual of like the otherworldly gateway under the side.
Like a proper mirror image as well. That would be cool.
I want to do that one.
There you go. you got that. That's yours now.
Thanks.
I guess compared to the Shadowfell, so it talks about these Fae crossings being a bit more infrequent. So they're not, I guess, whereas maybe Evil not deliberate evil, but like I guess where there's always shadow and darkness, it is a part of every single world. So maybe it's, I don't know, more frequent perhaps because there's just more death, maybe there's just more despair, I guess. Here they're infrequent, so it might only open during a full moon, on the dawn of a particular day, or for someone who has a certain type of item. I seem to remember there was some unearthed arcana, can't remember which one obviously, but they talked about being able to open passages, but only if you were from a lineage of like blessed bloodlines. So that idea that you're a worthy traveler because you have the right blood going in, and again, that sort of idea of the Fae being very picky about who can come in and come out, and being very sort of jealous for no reason, just because they can, because they're so old and they have been around forever, that's all they've got really to entertain themselves.
Yeah, I read that Fae in the Sealy Court must trace their ancestry back for at least a millennia.
Oh, really?
That's wild.
Oh my God, who do you think you are? But Feywild edition.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. It turns out your great-grandfather was unseelie. Get out. You're expelled from the court.
No. Yeah. Oh, that would make such an interesting, like as a player coming into that, going, we have to find out who these people are, and then you reveal it, and then there's like the court getting in disarray, and because
what a quest! What a great quest to send them on.
With the courts as well. Again, you set up for some great adventures, because again, the idea that if you topple someone from one court, they're sort of held in balance, sort of. They're rivals against each other. But again, it's the idea of taking one, crippling it, or getting a power vacuum, then the other will take over, and that's not necessarily a good thing, which I quite like that idea. Again, a bit like if we did an episode on like devils and demons, and obviously the angels, and the idea of the balance. If one side wins, it's bad for everyone. So I like the idea of having that on a smaller level, like who controls the Feywild. It's
like that movie Alien versus Predator. It's like whoever wins, we lose. It's like you do not want the demons or the devils to win the blood war. You want them just to keep fighting it until the end of time.
I love that idea, that just taking that attitude of Alien versus Predator and putting it in the Feywild. That has to happen.
Yeah. We're going to make the greatest D&D adventure of all time. It's going to have emo Fae patrons. It's going to have Alien versus Predator with fairy folk.
Why not? I guess just to finally finish off then, so as we sort of talked about with the Shadowfell, they've got the Feywild magic. So here there's like two sort of optional rules. The main one, which I think most people will be aware of, is this idea of memory loss. So that I think it's such a cool idea that when you go to this place, because it's so amazing, wonderful, but when you leave, is that almost like, not even shattering, but that sort of like culture shock of coming back into somewhere where, because it's so beautiful, so overwhelming, that you have to make a wisdom saving throw of 10 DC. Fae creatures automatically succeed, which makes sense, because obviously they're from that culture, so coming back in is not too problem. But if they fail it, they remember nothing of the time spent. And even on a success, they have memories, but they're very fuzzy. So even then, all your experiences might have happened to you yesterday. It feels like it happened to you 10 years ago because you can't remember the specific details.
If you're running a game and you think that with 5 players, that they won't all roll under 10, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. And it's absolutely possible for that to happen.
Oh, I can imagine, because they're like, well, what do we do? And you never remember. And that's...
Yeah. I think what happened is everyone rolled low, and then one of the players remembered they were an elf, and they were the only one that remembered. And slowly we're like, we need to find someone who can fix this. Greater restoration. We need it right now.
Any spell that can end a curse can restore a creature's lost memories. But I like to think every time I go into another room and I go, what did I come in here for? I've gone through the Feywild. Mm-hmm. I came in here for something, and I will wait 2 minutes before I have to go back into the other room and go, it was this. Yeah. That's the feeling you had going, I came here for something. What was it? Having to play that out is just a cool thing.
I used to think of it as like, when Sims go do something and you cancel the action, so they just do nothing. They enter a room and they do nothing. I used to think of it as like that. But now whenever I forget what I'm doing, I'll be like, damn, Feywild again.
Fuck. Yeah, again, just a way to describe it. Maybe it just shows how old we are, Darren. I instantly got you. It was like, yeah, that's what I do with my Sims. Like, what are you doing that for? I told you to clean the dishes. I'm like, oh. It's just like, oh. I
went from Sims, this is a total side tangent, but I went from Sims 1, where it was so hard to get them just to like wash their hands for them after they peed and everything. And now I just turned on the Sims 4, and it turns out that they can sit at a table, eat their breakfast, call someone to socialize, and if someone else sits down, they'll put the phone down and they'll do a 3-way call with the 2 people. And I was like, excuse me?
That's amazing.
Incredible. I literally, or your character's doing their job at a computer and someone's doing their job at a computer in the same room, and they talk, and I'm like, It was so hard for so long. It's so easy now, and I love it.
Yeah, it's now like, okay, you can now socialize whilst doing other things like multitasking. Whereas right now, it's like, I must go outside to talk to someone. You're like, invite them in. Oh, but you're hungry. Eat dinner. Don't say anything to them whilst you're eating dinner.
Two people just silently eating breakfast for like, because it takes 2 hours to eat a meal in that game as well. It was like,
I don't know if you were like me, but as soon as I learned stuff like lobster thermidor, I was like, that's all you're having for every meal because it's. Yeah. I'm sure it's the best food. Like you'd get the love bed, you get the best things because it's like you need to sleep. If you can only do something one thing at a time, it's like you get the best of everything. And now you're like, oh, it's not too bad because you can talk at the same time. Yeah, all my Sims are weirdly lonely.
I started putting the loner trait on all my Sims if they're in a house on their own because check social media just doesn't seem to be helping my Sims anymore.
Oh no!
Sadder
they just get sadder and sadder because everyone's bloody out having fun with their friends. You're like, no.
Yeah.
It's just too hard to get socialized and stuff. Anyway, to finish that tangent. So the other optional rule you can have for the Feywild is, well, they call it the time warp, which I love because instantly it's like it is. I just assumed that that whole sort of Rocky Horror is now in the Feywild, and that's what they all look like.
It has to be, right? That tracks for me. That's an unseelie court.
Yes. Oh my god, yeah. The Queen of Air and Darkness is actually Frankenfurter. That's
100%. I will go to war over that. A fact. It is not an opinion, it's a fact.
It's a fact, fine. You've heard it here first, folks, on DM's Book Club.
My first strong opinion is this is it.
You've planted your flag, essentially. So.
The hill I'm going to die on.
Whilst the time in the Feywild seems to pass normally, characters can spend maybe a day there and realise that upon leaving time, less or more time has elapsed elsewhere in the universe. I assume you did this for your stuff, but essentially you can do it so where the day you spent there is literally a minute, or it can even go to the point where the day you spend there is a year. Have you used this at all in your campaigns then?
Yes. So I learned about this rule when Googling the specifics of the memory loss, and I saw it, and they were on a time-sensitive crunch. Just quick overview. One of the players' parents got sick. They got poisoned by a magical deck of cards. It was like a deck of many things, but the whole group participated. It's a magic item I made, and it's chaos incarnate. Yes. It's incredible. But they were sick, and they were like, we got to go. We need to go here because we know this is where the cards came from, so we can get this solved. And they were coming back, and they had 3 days left. They knew like about 3 days until she died. And I was like, listen, I didn't know there was time warp magic. So I showed them the table, and I was like, I'm going to roll in front of everyone.
Whoa.
And everyone was talking about like, oh, she could be dead. But one of my players was like, look at the bottom option. 100 years could go by. Everyone could be dead. And we rolled, and I think we got like time passed as normal.
Oh.
And I was like, everything they just did, all the suffering they went through. One of them sold like their soul, I think. And I was like, all this could just be for nothing.
What a great story thing.
Yeah.
If there's no consequences for players for doing that sort of thing, then like I guess that's always the thing, it's like consequences in D&D, but God, that could have been incredible because that could have just derailed that bit, but then it would have come on to something brand new because then they'd be like, well, how do we get back? How do we, what can we do to repair this? And just, days become minutes, days become hours, no change, which is 7 to 13. So it's almost like you've got a good 6 and 20 chance that you can get that. Days become weeks, days become months, and then, like you said, on a natural 20, days become years.
I think I got 12. They were in there for 6 days, and I rolled a 12. Mm-hmm. So they had 3 days left. But had they rolled a 14, that was
weeks. That would have been, yeah. But it does say, so a wish spell can be used to remove the effect upon 10 creatures. So a wish spell, but obviously wishes are so, but that's the thing, they are so, it's a one-off thing. So powerful Fae have the ability to grant such wishes and might do so if they agree to subject themselves to and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, is it Gaia spell, so Geas.
I've heard it pronounced Gaish and Gaius.
Well, there you go. One thing we're good at on the DM's Book Club is pronouncing things incorrectly and not worrying too much about it.
I've read that in a book recently, and it's like in the book, it's like you're bound to follow commands or your soul is ripped apart.
Yes.
It's kind of, I think in D&D, it's a spell where you mind controllers.
Yeah, so it's the duration is 30 days. You place a magical command on a creature you can see within range and force it to carry out some service or refrain from some action or course of activity that you decide. The creature can understand you, must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or become charmed by you for that duration, so 30 days. Whilst the creature is charmed by you, it takes 5d10 psychic damage each time it acts in a manner directly counter to your instructions, but no more than once per day.
That's not so bad.
It's not so bad, but it's still like, I guess, obviously, if you're low level, and that's what I was going to say as well. So with the Feywild for you, would you introduce that at a lower level, at the same level that you introduced the Shadowfell at?
So I set my players to a demi-plane of the Feywild. It was the plane of moonlight. And in that, if you step into darkness, you're just pulled into it and you're gone. So it was like survival horror.
Oh my God.
I remember when they first arrived, one of them had a glowing, a light spell. And I described like hands, like trying to reach into the light and just like being disintegrated as they tried. One of the players has a true sight for a round. So they true sighted and they saw like all these monsters, just like thousands of them in the darkness. I think if you want to do a really like hardcore, like this is hard to survive, you might like lose yourself to the Fey, do it low level. If you want to have a fun time in the Feywild and have like a romp through like fun characters without too much risk, I think do it higher level. It's like almost the opposite of the Shadowfell. If you go early in the Shadowfell, it's not so bad, but later is worse. Where it's like the opposite for the Feywild for me.
Interesting. Oh no, I think that's completely fair. Like again, like both the Feywild and the Shadowfell, they're so different and you can have so much amazing adventure. And I love that idea that you just described about like having horror in the Feywild, and that idea, it reminds me of, again, slight tangent, there's a podcast called the Magnus Archives, which is a bit like X-Filed.
I love it.
It's so good, isn't it? Like, and the very first episode is the one I always remember, where it was in Edinburgh, and it's the idea of this the anglerfish. There was like a light, and somebody then being pulled, there's a hand reaching out with the light and all that sort of thing. So that's what literally, when you're describing that, that's what I imagine. It's almost like, oh, there's something there, and then just being sucked into a void. And I highly recommend the Magnus Archives if you love sort of the X-Files or sort of weirdness sort of thing, but with a British sort of like, the idea of the Institute and audio recordings and stuff. Yeah. Amazing. Absolutely highly recommend Magnus Archives.
I can't remember if it was Magnus Archives or one of the SCPs, but there was like a place at the edge of the world where this giant light hung from the sky and they thought it was a moon, but it was actually just the antenna of an anglerfish, and it was waiting for enough people to live in the city before it closed its mouth. And I was just like, I love anglerfish. I think the visual is haunting and it's so much fun. If you're doing underwater stuff, throw in a giant anglerfish. It's so fun.
Have you seen the new Luca at all with Disney Plus?
I have not.
So it's a new Pixar film, and I'll say this again, complete tangent to what we're talking about, but they do sort of almost like it's about obviously Italian underwater creatures who then go up.
I've seen the trailer. Yeah. So
the way they're sort of rendered is almost, it does look like tritons or underwater things, just the way their hair is. So that's incredible as well. There is, and it's not really a spoiler, but there is someone who plays like an anglerfish type uncle, and that's as an NPC. I would have that as a creepy sort of, because again, their eyes are looking around different places. You can see their heart. They get distracted by their own little like light bulb thing, and they're it's horrible. So creepy. But they're only a really small bit of it. But I remember it because I'm just like, that would be a really cool NPC, like creepy sort of thing. Like they're probably, that sort of thing where they're harmless and they're just a bit weird. But like the idea that you could see their heart and then like the teeth everywhere and the eyes looking around everywhere is just.
Okay, I'm adding that straight away. I'm putting it into my list.
Unfortunately, Darren, we've come to the end of our... I know. It's been so fun to have you. Why don't you tell us, like, what have you got planned? Like, I hear you've got a very successful Kickstarter going on of your new game. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
I actually had to cancel it and relaunch it because I made a mistake in the printing costs and I didn't want to overcharge the people who supported. Sure. So even though we hit 200% of the goal, I've cancelled it and I've said, I let everyone know, and I was like, thank you for support. I'm going to change this so that everyone can everyone's going to save like 20, 30 quid, I think, because the printing costs, I thought I could pay them for everyone, but it's not how it works.
No.
So we'll be relaunching, I think, October 1st. I'm going to do a nice Halloween one because it's, it is a new tabletop game. I love D&D. Please don't attack me. I also love D&D. I just want to make a game. So it's post-apocalyptic. It has the same things that D&D fans will love. You choose a species, you choose an origin, because backgrounds are boring as hell and I can't stand them. So origins are a little more epic, like you can choose like things like you were experimented on or you survived an encounter with a demon, like big origins. A profession, which is quite similar to a class in D&D, but they're all very basic, like real world stuff, like a medic, a sharpshooter, a gunslinger, a knight, things like that. And then you choose your evolution, which is your kind of otherworldly special nature. Maybe you're a blessed soul, maybe you're telekinetic, maybe you're psionic, maybe you have lycanthropy or you're a vampire. So the big combination of like your species, origin, profession and evolution mean that, like, I think I did the number, there's thousands of combinations. And if you count the specializations, which are like subclasses, there's tens of thousands. So
amazing.
Every character you make is going to be the only one of that character.
Oh, that is so cool. And so you said it's like a post-apocalyptic type thing then?
Yeah, so the world, take your traditional fantasy setting, you're in Waterdeep, advance 1,000 years so that you get, the rise of technology, people begin, it becomes way more common, firearms become more common, and then the world, they open a portal to the wrong place, the world gets absolutely decimated, and now you are part of the people who survived. There are parts of the world that are nice, you can set a campaign in like a rural, faraway area where you get a more traditional fantasy experience, or you go like full Fallout and you put yourself near where the apocalypse happened. So it's super varied. You can do like Western style campaigns, you can do classic fantasy, you can do apocalyptic. I've been running 2 in it where one is like very, very close to the end of the world. And it's very much like you could feel it. You feel it in everyone's vibe, like everyone's living in the day. And another one where they haven't even seen a demon, and they live super far away and life is good, and it feels very much like a regular fantasy campaign.
Amazing.
I've been loving it.
It sounds so versatile. So what's it going to be called then?
It is called Fallen Worlds.
Fallen Worlds, exciting. And then you said that's going to be out October time-ish. So obviously, we'll definitely be signal boosting that and things.
I really appreciate it. Honestly, I was shocked. I thought maybe in the 30 days I might get the stretch goal, but then like day one it hit the 100%, and I was in fucking tears. I was like, I can't believe I'm actually going to be able to make the game and like pay the editors. Like I don't want to hire an editor and pay them the bare minimum. I want to pay the editor a fair wage for what they're doing. I want to bring on guest writers and pay them a fair wage. But it all depends on how much we can kind of get people to play.
But absolutely. But if you had any advice to people who are thinking about like maybe monetizing this stuff, if they've got homebrew stuff, and like, what would you say to that? Because I know some people, when they create the homebrew, say, oh, it's just a bit silly, I don't want to be paid for it. But from you, because obviously you went from creating it and then putting it on DM's Guild and obviously getting paid for it, and now doing your own Kickstarter where you're going to be hopefully, people are supporting you and you're going to get editors and stuff in. So what would you say to that if somebody wanted to do that but wasn't sure about the money side to it, I guess?
DM's Guild's a great place, and there's other places like Itch and Drive-Thru RPG. If you're going to post something for free, yes, maybe 100 people will download it, and none of them will say anything to you. So it doesn't mean anything. Like, they might take it in their game, but they'll never tell you about it. But if you charge 99 cents, 10 people will buy it, and at least one of them is going to talk to you about it because they paid for it. It's like, you should be paid for this. You've put the work in. You've probably made something that's at least worth 99 cents, It's just 99 cents. And if you're not feeling confident, if you're like, oh, I don't know if it's worth it, put a full preview. That's what I've started doing. I put all my work up for full preview so you can see everything you're getting before you buy. So if you don't feel confident, put a full preview, but always charge something for it because it's worth something. You put it to pen paper, it's worth something.
Completely agree. Like, even getting that comment back from somebody saying I used it or I have constructive feedback, that's what I hope people send to you. But I think that's valuable in itself. Like, you will get that rather than just people just like you said, like 100 people taking it and not giving you any feedback, whereas 10 people taking it and at least somebody saying, oh, I really enjoyed it, or I used this in my game, it was great. Yeah, absolutely.
Someone told me, I think for my Elemental Paladins, 2 years after I launched it, someone emailed me and they were like, hey, I have a question to clarify a class feature because like we think we could use it in this way. And apparently he'd been using it for a campaign for 2 years. It was like an Ember Paladin about revival and fire. And he was like, he wanted to heal, but he also wanted fire magic. And it was a perfect little niche. Like, someone out there, when you create it, it's their perfect little niche. So
that's awesome. Like, it feels almost like very much like Gary Gygax when you could look him up in the phone book and ring him up for rule clarifications. That's kind of what's just happened to you. So that's amazing.
Is it Chris Perkins no, it's Jeremy Crawford on Twitter. People go, can I use this in the completely wrong way? And he's like, it says in the rules, please read the rules. Please, can people please start reading the rules? Like, you can see how tired he's become of people just trying to like lawyer their way into stuff.
Where can we find the rest of your work then, Darren? Obviously, the Kickstarter, that's going to be amazing. But if people want to find out more about the Elemental Paladin Oaths or your other, I know you've done lineages and subclasses and stuff, where can they find all that?
You can find me. I'm Darren Kenny on Dungeon Masters Guild. On Twitter, I'm Darkin Creations, because that was a great pun my dad said a few years ago. And I'm like, definitely going to use that. That's me.
That's you. Oh, no, brilliant. And I'll round off by saying my name's Fiona. I run the What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. And as always, it's going very well. Surprise, I am now writing for Dungeon Plus, that's a different magazine, Dragon Plus magazine, doing certain things. I know. If you want to read my little interview with Darren, that's probably coming out at the same time this comes out. So that one very exciting. Yeah, I know. It's all worked out beautifully as a result.
I'm basically famous. Going to get myself an agent now.
Oh. We've also done some other bits and pieces. Bluebird's Bride is coming out. We've got some other bits and pieces. And we've done a sci-fi one. I don't know if you've read any. I think it's called Vert by Paul Noon. It's a sci-fi train spotting, but set in an alternate Manchester.
What?
It's great RPG system, but also like the book it's based on, you have these things called feathers, which look like actual feathers, I believe, I don't know. And you take them, like you tickle the back of you for almost like a PRC test or for a COVID, and then you experience your sort of own simulation stuff, but as a drug-induced state. Really cool, really interesting.
Awesome,
so hopefully that'll be out coming soon. And finally, obviously, hey, we've got an offer code. If you fancy getting some RPG goodness or miniatures or anything like that, we've got a code DMBC at Third Space Gaming. So that's a friendly local game store in Burnley, so northwest of England. I completely forgot where I was from originally. And so try out, you get 10% off your first order. So whether that's miniatures, whether that's RPG books, well, not the whole store. So do they
ship internationally?
If you ask nicely, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they did. There is some. I think they certainly ship within the UK and Isles and stuff. So have a check. Might as well. And if not, I'm sure I can ask the owners. I do know their names. I just can't think off the top of my head.
That's okay.
But with that, thank you so much, Darren, and thank you all for listening. We will speak to you, hear from you. We'll do something with you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.